Okay, welcome friends to the United Lodge of Theosophists in Washington, D.C. Today is the new year, January 1st, and we have a talk, Thoughts on the New Year. But first, we'll have a devotional reading from Light on the Path.
Before the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears. Before the ear can hear, it must be lost its sensitivities. Before the voice can speak in the presence of the masters, it must have lost the power to wound. Before the soul can stand in the presence of the masters, its feet must be washed in the blood of the heart. Kill all ambition. Kill out desire of life. Kill out desire of comfort. Work at those who are ambitious. Respect life as those do who desire it. Be happy as those are who live for happiness. Seek in the heart the source of evil and expunge it. It lives fruitfully in the heart of the devoted disciple as well as in the heart of the man of desire. Only the strong can kill it out. The weak must wait for its growth, its fruition, its death. And it is a plant that lives and increases throughout the ages. It flowers when the man has accumulated into himself innumerable existences. He who will enter upon the path of power must tear this thing out of his heart, and then the heart will bleed, and the whole life of the man seem to be utterly dissolved. This ordeal must be endured. It may come at the first step of the perilous ladder which leads to the path of life. It may not come until the last. But, O disciple, remember that it has to be endured, and fasten the energies of your soul upon the task. Live neither in the present nor the future, but in the eternal. This giant weed cannot flower there. This blood upon existence is wiped out by the very atmosphere of eternal thought. Kill out all sense of separateness. Kill out desire for sensation. Kill out the hunger for growth. Desire only that which is within you. Desire only that which is beyond you. Desire only that which is unattainable. For within you is the light of the world, the only light that can be shed upon the path.
Thank you. So today's meeting will be a short talk followed by questions and answers between 11 and 12. And then we'll take like a 5-minute break before we start a roundtable reading and discussion of the Bhagavad Gita. So welcome, friends, and Happy New Year. The New Year has been celebrated throughout the ages, and today we'll discuss the meaning of the New Year, its significance from the Theosophical viewpoint, and why Theosophists believe it should be celebrated on January 4th instead of January 1st. And I have a few slides, and I'm going to try to share them. I'm sorry about the bar. I think it's going to be helpful to have the bar there. So HPB once wrote, "Let no one imagine that it is a mere fancy, the attaching of importance to the birth of the year. The earth passes through its phases and man with it. And as a day can be colored, so can a year. The astral life of the earth is young and strong between Christmas and Easter. And those who form their wishes now will have added strength to fulfill them consistently." HPB tells us that historically, many peoples and civilizations, both prehistoric and historic, divided the year into solar and lunar months. We all recognize the sun returns from its southernmost journey back to the northern hemisphere, and the light begins to increase on the winter solstice. When the sun comes back to the northern hemisphere, it brings with it a vivifying influence to all the kingdoms of nature. These influences touch the inner lives of all forms and give a renewed impetus to expansion and growth. It is therefore important that we take note of this time, specifically the months of December and January, the ending of the year and the beginning of the new year. You may recall last month's talk touched upon the descent of the gods of Olympus to our hemisphere. And HPB tells us that this is not an imaginary thing, but that it is real. Beginning with the winter solstice, the light of the sun increases. And HPB says that during this time, the astral life of the earth is renewed. So this energy is electromagnetic. It is added to the atmosphere. HPB says that if we take into consideration that these influences, we can take advantage of this part of the season, and what we undertake will have an added impulse. We can move forward the progressive awakening of the soul, and in this way we work with nature, and by cooperating with the natural cycles, we're more likely to achieve our goals. Another interesting aspect of this time of year is the curious fact that the many historical saviors of the world recorded over the past millions of years were always born in December or early January. And HPB gives us some names: the Persian Mithra, the Egyptian Osiris, the Greek Bacchus, the Phoenician Adonis, the Christian Jesus, and even the Buddhist Gautama. All of these gods came before us to bring the same message, the same ethics of charity, love, and universal brotherhood, the same idea of personal responsibility. But what is the significance of this happening in January? In Greek and Roman times, Janus, the god of time, the double-faced god, was celebrated in January. In those days, Janus was represented with two heads joined at the neck. One face is looking to the east, representing the past, and one face is looking to the west, representing the future. Janus, being the doorkeeper, sees in both directions. He knows what has taken place and what will come to pass. The sun gods of many traditions had an altar with 12 basic gods. These gods represented the zodiac. The zodiac represents human life and man's journey through different universal aspects. HPB tells us that the sun stood for Christ. Statues of Janus January have been symbolized in various ways. In one way, in his right hand was the number 300, and in the left, the number 65. When we add the two together, we get the 365 days in the year. In other representations, as in the one we have here, he has a key in one hand and a scepter in the other. Hence, Janus is the janitor or doorkeeper of the heavens, because in January, the janitor is going to open the heavens and allow the influences to come further down into our plane of consciousness. Some old Roman coins had the picture of Janus on one side and a boat on the other. Why? HPB tells us we can take this picture to be the prototype of Peter, the fisherman of the celestial ship and the upper realm. Again, the separation between the planes is more flexible at this time of year, and this is what Janus is celebrating. Every December, according to the Japanese, is the month of arrival, or descent of the gods. Therefore, there may be a considerable number of deities moving around us mortals in astral space. The 3rd of January, a day which was before the time of Clovis consecrated to the worship of Isis, she who generates life, was also set apart as the day on which the deities of Olympus visited their worshippers. Again, suggesting the connection between the spiritual and material is more permeable and closer together at this time of year. The 3rd day of every month was sacred to Pallas Athene, the goddess of wisdom. And January 4th is the day of Mercury, Hermes, Buddha, who is credited with adding brains to the heads of those who are civil to him. December and January are the 2 months most connected with gods and with numbers. It is January the 4th, which ought to be selected by the Theosophists, HPB wrote, the esotericists especially, as their new year. January is under the sign of Capricornus, the mysterious Makara of the Hindu mystics, the Kumaras, it being stated, having incarnated in mankind under the 10th sign of the zodiac. For the ages, the 4th of January has been sacred to Mercury Buddha, or Thoth Hermes. Thus, everything combines to make of that date a festival, to be held by those who study ancient wisdom. Whether called Bud or Buddhi, but its Aryan name, Mercurius, the son of Caelus and Hecate, or of the divine white and infernal black magic by its Hellenic, or again Hermes, its Greco-Egyptian name, the day seems in every way more appropriate for us than January the 1st. All no doubt have made New Year's resolutions, and all no doubt have failed to keep them. There must be a reason for these failures, as well as for the fact that there comes this certain season in the year when we have the inclination to make resolutions. These reasons lie hidden in the depths of our own being. The ancients celebrated and understood what was called by them the birth of the sun, or the return of the sun on its northern course beginning the 21st of December. They knew that all the occult forces in nature have an upward and increasing tendency at the return of the sun. When the sun's rays become warmer and stronger, all the other forces behind the sun itself and behind ourselves become stronger within us. So, in this rising wave of spiritual and psychic renewal, all that we desire to do has a greater impulsion than at some other time of the year. And this is why we make New Year's resolutions. But to effect our resolutions, we have to call on the will. For that will is not restrained by any form or obstacle whatever. Theosophically speaking, the will is not what is ordinarily called will by mankind in general. We are prone to think that a person who is very determined on gaining his own ends has a strong will and is very positive in his character. But such a person exhibits only a kind of will. He has very, very strong desires rather than will itself. There are many exhibitions of will, some phases being quite unrecognized, others very recognizable. The will to live is an aspect of the will. If the will to live were not present, we would not live. It's not the body which holds us here, but the desire to live. Always behind will stands desire. Again, every one of man's bodily organs and processes was at one time evolved by conscious effort. Even the process of digestion, of assimilation, the heartbeat, the various qualities and functions of all the organs were consciously evolved. Now we have bodies which will proceed automatically, while we use our consciousness, perceptions, and attention in other directions. Our will then operates in reality in every part of our physical life, though we may not be able to perceive it and understand it. There is also a mental phase of the will, which can be cultivated by practice. The fixed attention or concentration in certain directions capable of effecting desired results. But the real and true will is shown as the spiritual will, which flies like light and cuts through all obstacles like a sharp sword. It is that will, proceeding from the highest spiritual part of our natures, which causes man to be in evolution from within outwards, through all the forms of substance that there has been, and to continue evolving instruments in the state of matter. All the powers that exist or can exist are latent, however well expressed or not expressed in the spiritual nature. We draw from it in degree, but usually in a small degree, because most of us, having our ideas so fixed on physical existence, we've come to the conclusion that life means nothing more than physical existence. Were we once conscious of our spiritual nature? We were once conscious of it, but as we came down through the planes of matter to this plane, we made a growth in intellectuality at the expense of spiritual perception. With our intellect, we always reason from premises to conclusions, whereas the spiritual nature has the power of direct cognition of truth, direct cognition of the nature of anything so regarded. So our intellectual gain was at the loss of this spiritual insight. And it's useless for theology, science, and psychology to proceed from the personal and physical perceptions in order to get to an understanding of what man really is in totality. The psychological causes are but reflections of physical ideas. So if we're going to realize our own nature, we should begin at the highest point of our nature, and assume that it is the highest point and hold to that, the power of that assumption. By doing this, we begin to see light by the very affirmation of the spiritual nature. The more we use our faculties in this direction, like a muscle, the easier it is to use, and the more facility we gain with using it. Thus, we become more accustomed to a rarefied spiritual atmosphere, and we learn to maneuver within that realm. As we stand, we are always using our will in the line of our desires, of our likes and dislikes, imagining these to be a proper basis for thought and action. What is most necessary for us is a proper basis for thinking. We need to reject the false idea that we are weak, sinful creatures, possessing all the faults of our parents and their parents. We need to reject the mental idol of an outside creator. We need to understand the purpose of life, to see that we are the product of many prior lives, and to recognize an evolution under law, a law both true and merciful, which operates everywhere. It's because that law operates in a cycle of impressions that we have the tendency each year to make New Year's resolutions. We could, by an understanding and use of this law of recurrence, bring into effect those positive resolutions. When making them, HPB recommends that we don't frame them in the negative, like, I won't do this or I won't do that, but to frame them in the positive and to emphasize what we can and will do. Often we make resolutions because it's proper to make them, but we don't really expect that we're going to keep them. We remember them for a few days, and then gradually the old desires reassert themselves, and we find ourselves traveling along an old and familiar way. Resolutions will never do us any good if we don't sustain them. And a desire is not condition enough. The mere desire will not get us anywhere. First, we have to maintain the desire. Second, we have to stick to the resolution. And third, we have to exert our will and cleave to the object of that will throughout all the ups and downs. We can't get rid of a negative or of any evil within us by thinking about it. And that's because we're attached to anything through our thought. So by thinking about it, we create a connection, and what we think about expands. So the harder we don't think about the evil in ourselves, the better. We should instead think about their opposites. Think of the good and the universal themes of brotherhood, love, and charity, and how we express that. And then evil will not have a chance to return. Think of the good within ourselves. Focus on our positive attributes and always appreciate oneself each time one expresses something good. And this way, we build up a habit and an intention to continue along that line. Attachment to either good or evil is within the mind, and it's through our thoughts. Desire exists in the thought and is then followed by the action. So we need to have this firm basis for our thinking if we're ever going to express ourselves as we should as spiritual beings. We should assiduously practice this, and as we do so, we become better and better at it until there's no room for the negative or evil in our nature to take hold. We can choose what we think about. We can train our minds to follow positive desires and follow those desires with positive will and action. We have a chance to progress spiritually if we understand our own natures. Let us resolve to know, to think right, and to do right. Resolve to acquire some of the knowledge that has always existed, the knowledge of man as a spiritual being, throughout all the fluctuations in life. As we rely more and more upon the self within, we begin to express and use the power which we already have and is far more than we imagine. We have to help ourselves by taking the suggestions given in the teachings of Theosophy, which are the master's suggestions. And then, as the sustaining power of the will is held along the line in which we desire to do, more direct help comes from those elder brothers who at every hour of each day are, quote, willing and anxious to meet those clear-eyed enough to see their true destiny and noble-hearted enough to work for the great orphan humanity, unquote. Since January 4th is the date that should be chosen for the Theosophical New Year, according to HPB, we can try to understand some of what she tells us about numbers, their symbolism, and powers from the secret doctrine. Firstly, in occultism, the significance and potency of numbers and numerals lie in their right application and permutation. Everything is disposed according to number, and numbers provide the underlying substratum of the universe. When the ideal becomes manifest, it does so according to number, according to ratio, according to harmony. This clearly shows the universe proceeds through reason and order. While none of us, at this level are experts, we can look to the secret doctrine to understand some of the basic digits and their meanings from this ancient science as taken from the proem in the secret doctrine. All things proceed from unity, and once the first number emanates from it, a power is released, causing all subsequent numbers and forces to come forth. And there appears to be a greater power among the single digits, because they're closest to that unity. If William Q. Judge once remarked that words are like messengers, so we can infer the same regarding numbers. They are archetypes and forces, with greater numbers being combinations of the single digits. So subsequent digits are combinations of these forces, expressing character, expressing tension, equilibrium, regeneration, etc. There's also a play between even numbers and odd numbers and forces, essentially the same as there is between any dual forces, such as yin and yang. So from the secret doctrine, the first illustration of cosmogenesis, there is this plain disk, essentially the zero or Laya point, a cipher where naught exists. In a positive sense, the void, shunya, the doorway to higher and formless realms of non-being, or the zero. The second one in the archaic symbolism shows a disk with a point in it, And this is the first differentiation in the periodical manifestations of the ever-eternal nature, sexless and infinite. As the Rig Veda puts it, a deity in that. The point in the disk or potential space within abstract space. In this third stage, the point is transformed into a diameter. Thus, it now symbolizes a divine, immaculate Mother Nature within the all-embracing absolute infinitude. And this diameter, if we were to take it out of the circle, is essentially the digit 1, the unity that is born from 0, the emanation from the point. From the 1 comes the other, or 2, duality with all that implies, even and odd, yin and yang, light and dark, hot and cold, form and formless. This stage marks the beginning of arithmetic and the combining of numbers. Duality begets conflict. By the third symbol, the circle divided in two by the horizontal line of the diameter, the first manifestation of creative, still passive because feminine, nature was meant. Nature is considered feminine because man knows his mother more than his father. Hence, female deities were more sacred than the male. Nature is feminine and to a degree objective, intangible, and the spirit principle which fructifies it is concealed. From this, the triangle, the 3, there comes father, mother, and offspring, from whence comes creation, the solution to the stalemate of opposing dual forces, when the one, the unity, acts upon duality in a continuous manner, begetting generation. When the horizontal diameter is crossed by a vertical one, it becomes the mundane cross, and humanity has reached its third root race. It's the sign for the origin of human life to begin. When the circumference disappears and leaves only the cross, a sign that the fall of man into matter has been accomplished, and the fourth race begins. The symbol of terrestrial life on its most material plane, and the number 4. Also, there is the 3 in 1, or 4 of the tetractys, another potent symbol. And just to sort of summarize this, we have the blank disk, then the point, then the diameter, and then we move to triangles, and just the triangle can be inscribed within the circle or even outside the circle. But after the diameter is a cross, and then there's the horizontal, we get to the cross. This is the also been called Thor's hammer, and it appears on ancient Hindu temples, and this is a representation of it. And the cross symbolizes the number 4. The 5 is, when we get to 5, it's symbolized by the 5-pointed star, which symbolizes humanity and the mind, where the uppermost point of the star is the head of man and the supremacy of Manas. And there exists a continuous interplay of triangles within the 5-pointed star. There are other correlations, and while we're considering them in order, we must also consider the ratio of the diameter to the circumference of a circle, or pi, because this is symbolized as in the Secret Doctrine, HPB says the 3, the 1, the 4, the 1, the 5. And the mysteries this entails moving from the unmanifested to the manifested. The 6 comes from 2 interlaced triangles, or the sign of Vishnu. Adding the point in the center begets the 7. And furthermore, we are told the sacred number of the universe is 7. And theosophical literature is replete with examples of 7. The 7 principles of man and nature, 7 rays, etc. To return to January the 4th, well, and the other digits are basically, like we said, combinations of these. But to return to the 4th, January 4th, which HPB said ought to be selected by the Theosophists as the new year, again, because the 4th of January is sacred to Mercury, Buddha, Hermes. It's also when the sun is physically closest to the earth, and this is called perihelion. It occurs on January 4th, and the Earth's orbit is not a perfect circle around the sun. It's like a little bit oblong. And it's closer at January. So we're actually closer to the sun, but we don't feel the heat because the Earth is tilted in the northern hemisphere in January. We're tilted away, but still we are physically closer in our annual orbit. And that marks a special time that's unique in the year. To summarize, we recall HPB saying to let no one imagine that it's a mere fancy, the attaching of importance to the birth of the year. The earth passes through its definite phases and man with it. And it is, as a day can be colored, so can a year. The astral life of the earth is young and strong between Christmas and Easter. These energies can be manipulated by a person due to the presence of the powers of thought and will in him, and according to how he uses them will be the karmic result brought about. The earnest spiritual seeker, aware of these facts, is careful not to use these energies in a selfish way. Instead, he can take advantage of this time not only to gain spiritual strength, but also to send blessings and goodwill to others. To incorporate theosophy in daily life, Robert Crosby advised first to think what we are in reality on arising each day, to endeavor to realize what the small segment of our great existence may mean in the long series of such existences, to resolve to live throughout the day from the highest of our realizations, to see in each event and circumstance a reproduction in small or in great of that which has been, and to deal with each and every one of these from the same high point. Resolve to deal with them as though each had a deep occult meaning and presented an opportunity to further the successes of the past or undo the errors. Thus, living from moment to moment, hour to hour, life will be seen as a portion of the great web of action and reaction, intermeshed at every point and connected with the soul which provided the energy that sustained it. If each event is so considered throughout the day, be it small or great, the power to guide and control your energies will in no long time be yours. The smaller cycles of the personal ego will be related to the divine ego, and the force that flows from the latter, from the divine ego, will show itself in every way, will strengthen the whole nature, and will even change the conditions, physical and otherwise, which surround you. As HPB said, according to theosophical tenets, every man and woman is endowed, more or less, with a magnetic potentiality, which, when helped by a sincere and especially by an intense and indomitable will, is the most effective of magic levers placed by nature in human hands, for woe or for weal. Let us then, as Theosophists, use that will to send a sincere greeting and wish of good luck for the new year to every living creature under the sun, enemies and relentless traducers included. Let us try and feel especially kindly and forgiving to our foes and persecutors, honest or dishonest, lest some of us should send unconsciously an evil greeting, an evil eye instead of a blessing. by watching our thoughts, by sincerity, by acting to the highest within us that we can, we will, by using our will, thought, and feeling, to reinforce the good and to send a blessing instead of a curse or something like that. So on that note, we know what instruments we have and how to use them. We send blessings to all, and may 2023 be a year of activation of the will towards spiritual perception, striving, growth, and universal goodwill. Thank you. And now we welcome any thoughts or questions.
A question. Oh, I don't have my light. Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, in the Christmas talk, we talked about the sun being in a certain position in around December 21st, I believe. And then it's somewhere else. I was reading something about it. It quakes and then goes off. I think it's January 4th. Could you summarized January 4th, so that's fresh in my mind. So what was happening with the sun on the 21st versus the 3rd or 4th? You just told me about the 3rd or 4th. So I think one of them. No, I think it's the 4th is the quivering, and then it was it finished the cycle between the 21st and the 4th. Is that? I don't think I made my question very clear. But
No, well, maybe the speaker from the last month's talk might want to add anything, but as far as this student knows, because of the tilt of our planet, the shortest day of the year is December 21st, and it was mentioned that with the amount of light and the amount of, it said, warmth, there is a influence to that. So it comes to a close on the 21st, and then it begins to increase. So that represents a kind of cycle where there's a new upward impulse towards the spiritual, towards an increase of light and energy from the sun, our spiritual parent, so to speak. The sun stands for the Christ, the Christos principle, the spark of the one life, the God within, so that starts to increase, and then our planet is physically closest to the sun by January 4th. And, it was given historically how important that time is when not only are we physically closer to the sun and that spiritual influence and what it stands for, but the astral planes are more permeable to the higher influences. So it's a time when how we think and how we act is going to make an impression for the year ahead. But it's a time when also, if we're aware of it, it's a good time to institute a new cycle, a new tendency, a new thought, will, action, if you could sort of combine all those together, towards making a change, towards making that connection to the higher more permanent. I don't know if that helps. Maybe someone else has some thoughts to add to that.
I think, Kathy, your response goes in line with what we are taught in Theosophy, is to take advantage when the astral light is still young, both during the year and during each day in the morning as well. So it really helps to utilize that to give impetus to the thoughts, the higher thoughts that we are focused on.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because you're right that these cycles happen on a larger scale, but also on a smaller. Each day is like the microcosm of a year, or each week, or each month could also be seen in that way. And if we know how to use cycles, like the masters know the ultimate divisions of time, then we can, you know, work with nature, work with the higher self, who we really are, to bring about better conditions for ourselves and obviously for others. Because the goal is to bring the entire mass of egos to a higher point. Because we're really traveling in a spiral. It's not really a circle. It's actually more like a spiral. And as we go through time, we should theoretically be going to a higher stage, having gained experience, having gained, worked through karma.
Yeah, it's easy to understand the cycle of like a day's 24 hours. That's very easy. A year, that's pretty easy too. But then when we get these immense periods of time, it boggles your mind. So I guess the best we can do is understand that intellectually until we can understand it in a different way. I mean, like we don't have to understand it intellectually in a day or on a 24-hour period. There's daytime and nighttime. It's right there before our eyes. But when you're getting in those immense periods of time, and the masters know how to do that, that is what they have internalized that, and we haven't internalized that. And I guess that's the difference between them and us in terms of the cycles.
And just to add to that, they don't have gaps in consciousness like we do. You know, we have this break between sleep and wake, and through various periods, partly because, you know, like as was said, our instruments, we've been focused on the material plane, we've been distracted, but as we work towards being more like them, they don't have these gaps in consciousness through these immense periods of time, which is really like incredible to think about, that they can maintain the thread of thought, will, and action through a year, well, through a day, through a week, through a month. Let's keep it like even basic, through a year, through 10 years, through a lifetime, through many lifetimes, through centuries, through, you know, huge cycles. And it just shows us that starting even where we're at, it's the only place we can start, but it's super useful. It's just it's the best training, you know, we could ask for. It's right here in front of us. Doesn't mean it's easy to do, because we have, you know, so many things competing for our attention in terms of, you know, survival and, you know, integrating all these different things that come into our consciousness. But I think it's good to think about it in the macro and apply it in the micro, like think globally, act locally. Do that with the theosophical ideas.
And then, well, the cycle, it's said that at death, all this flashes before us as we are passing from this life to the next round. And at birth, you know, once again, you see that flashing for you. I don't remember. Yeah, I think none of us remember it. What happened when we were born, but that flashing before us, what we're supposed to be doing for this round, and these masters again see that all the time. Well, we just see it momentarily, and they know what they were doing in their last life. Of course, they live in that. They live in this ever. Well, we're living in it too, but we don't know it. We only know the material side of it. Well, they live in the material as well as the non-material, and they know.
We tend to apply our consciousness in a time-bound way, but as was said, if we could focus sort of on these cycles within cycles, and eventually we can lift our consciousness out of the time-bound. I mean, it's still there. A portion of it exists there always. It's just where our attention is focused. If we could learn to focus our attention on the higher planes, we would see that there is this realm that is beyond. It's in eternal duration, essentially. It's like outside of time, where the spiritual nature is really exists, so to speak. It's not subject to time. But yeah. Is that Alex? Did you?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, I wanted to ask.
Yeah, Alex had a question. All right.
I wanted to ask if there's some place where one could read more in depth on the theosophical meaning behind numbers, and where you got that information from.
Oh, it was from the Secret Doctrine, and just reading various articles and putting it together.
Okay, got it. I'm a big numbers person. So I was for interest.
But numbers are.
It's really interesting.
This pops in my head. In the spiritual level, numbers have a different meaning than we have. They have glyphs and things like that. The numbers 1, 2, 3, 7, and 10, and I think I vaguely remember talk about that. So
Yeah.
ask you about numbers, Alex. I'll try to get that reference to that talk I'm talking about, because I don't remember exactly where it is in the Secret Doctrine. It was based on that.
Yeah, HPB gives some references, like Pythagoras obviously was into numbers too, but he was also, a philosopher, and talked about, makes references to like general things, like that the even numbers had a sort of like a negative, sort of like they were like the negative side, and odd numbers were like the light, because odd numbers can't be divided. Things like that are just really interesting to think about. And I think it was Pythagoras who said you should, reflect on your day, like several times a day, but especially before you go to sleep, to review and break up the day, review it, and applaud what was good, and try to avoid any mistakes that you made that day, not to make them again. But yeah, the day is broken down into different parts. I think from some of the Eastern religions, there's like a god that presides over the morning, over the afternoon, there's like, I think they're called nakshastras, and I don't know too much about it, but that there are presiding influences within the day, because there are cycles within cycles, and then they can be divided up even more precisely.
But getting to this time, the first of the year, this is a good time to reflect on what happened last year and think about the things that we want to accomplish this year. In other words, get those resolutions, realistic resolutions made that you want to accomplish for the for 23.
And frame them in the positive. It was Judge or HPB said to try to phrase them in the positive, because you don't want to put yourself to do a negative.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But typically everybody says, well, I'm not going to eat junk, or I'm not going to do it. They frame it in the negative. It seems like human nature to do that, but just a tip, don't, frame it in the positive.
I think BP Warrior said somewhere to frame something in negative gives it more life.
Mhm.
So you really want to stay away from that.
That's right.
Yeah, I think those kind of orientations
Mm-hmm.
does make a difference.
Mhm.
How you start out
Mm-hmm.
in your cycle, in your approach, can set yourself up for success or failure.
Mhm.
So
If they always try to be positive, even if you're psychic, you need to recognize your mistakes in the past, but not in a negative way. Beat up on yourself for making a mistake. No, you try to learn from that experience, and on that side, you learn to say what you're going to do differently to avoid that mistake in the future.
yeah, another thought, Herb, about your first question was about this time of year. This time in the zodiac is supposed to be Capricorn, and that's when all the gods, so quote unquote, were born or were revealed to man to come to this plane, was during this time. So we know that there's some meaning behind it. And I believe that the Makara was the breaking through of barrier. Like as you go through the new year, you're breaking through the old into a new space. And like if you think of the planet, we're going around the sun, but the sun's moving. So actually it's like a whole thing moving through space. So we're actually entering new physical space. I think so. We're breaking through a barrier. We're going into totally new place we've never been, as like an Earth ship, as a galaxy ship, as a personal entity in our psychic space and in our physical space as well.
Bon voyage.
Oh Lord! Welcome to the new one.
I know we all, everyone's hopeful at the beginning of the year. You don't totally know what's in store for you, but I guess if you hold to some of these principles and techniques, then at least you could maybe deal with some of the ups and downs better than if you weren't trying to think ahead.
Or maybe just follow what Mr. Judge said, the ups or downs, this is what I just desired. So
Just the what?
Mr. Judge would say, right, when you look at ups and downs, just look at them as, and tell yourself, this is what I just desired.
This is in fact what my soul desires.
Yeah.
Want to meet back at 12:05 or something? If you need to take a break, just be back at 12:05.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.